I'm a licensed professional counselor, and this is my mental health analysis of the Vincent Darrell Groves case. These are my speculations.
The Clinical File with John Cordray.
What drives a person from a stable family background to target vulnerable individuals in such a calculated way? Vincent Darrell Groves grew up in a household that appeared supportive on the surface, yet his path veered into a violence that raises questions about hidden internal conflicts. In December 2025, investigators in Douglas County, Colorado, announced that they had connected Groves to the 1987 murder of Rhonda Marie Fisher through DNA evidence recovered from paper bags placed over her hands at the crime scene. This match linked her case to 3 other homicides from 1979 that Groves had already been associated with, bringing the total number of confirmed killings attributed to him to at least 12, with authorities suggesting the actual count could be much higher. This development came after the Douglas County Sheriff's Office Cold Case Unit reopened the investigation earlier that year and submitted additional items for advanced DNA analysis. The breakthrough highlights how forensic technology continues to uncover connections in long dormant cases, but it also prompts us to examine the psychological patterns that allowed Groves to operate undetected for so long. Groves was born on April 19, 1954, in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, as the eldest of 3 sons in the family where his father worked as a postman and his mother as a teacher. They resided in a suburb known for its upper-middle-class residents, and by all accounts, his parents provided a structured environment without any reported instances of abuse or neglect. Yet, even in such settings, subtle pressures or unmet needs can foster early signs of disconnection. What might happen when someone excels socially in high school but struggles to maintain that momentum in adulthood? During his time in Wheat Ridge High School, Groves stood out as the only black student in his graduating class of 1972. He earned recognition as prom king and excelled as a top player in the basketball team, suggesting a level of charisma and adaptability that could be masked deeper insecurities. These achievements point to an ability to navigate social dynamics effectively, a trait often seen in individuals who later display manipulative behaviors. From a mental health perspective, this contrast between outward success and internal turmoil might indicate an early red flag of identity fragmentation, where external validation becomes a crutch. After high school, Groves attended college but faced difficulties there, leading him to drop out and then begin using and distributing drugs. He moved in with his grandmother and took a job as an electrician at the Gates Rubber Company, a shift that marked the beginning of his descent into criminal activities. This period raises another question. How does involvement in drug distribution serve as a gateway to more violent expressions of control? In Groves' case, his entry into the drug world coincided with his documented participation in sex trafficking, activities that often involve exploitation and power imbalances. By 1978, Groves had begun the pattern of targeting women, many of whom were involved in prostitution or were otherwise vulnerable, such as hitchhikers. His first known victims included Emma in August 1978 and Joyce in May 1979. Both were strangled and left in remote areas around Denver. The choice to strangle suggests a desire for intimate dominance, a psychological indicator commonly associated with offenders seeking to exert ultimate control over their victims. Why would someone with seemingly normal upbringing gravitate towards such methods? Mental health analysis here points to possible underlying issues with attachment, where early experiences of perceived rejection, perhaps from academic failures, fuel the need to dominate others to regain a sense of power. In 1979, Groves claimed the lives of at least 3 more women, Peggy, Donna, and Carolyn. Each was found strangled with evidence of sexual assault, left in fields or along highways in the Denver metro area. The consistency in his approach reveals a ritualistic element, which from a psychological standpoint could stem from compulsive behaviors rooted in unresolved anger or trauma. Although no overt childhood abuse is documented, The escalation from drug use to homicide might reflect a buildup of unaddressed emotional dysregulation. Authorities arrested Groves in 1981 for the murder of Emma, leading to his conviction in 1982 for second-degree murder. He received a 12-year sentence, but served only about 4.5 years before being paroled in early 1987. This early release is a point where one might note the system's optimism regarding rehabilitation, though events would prove otherwise. What psychological factors contribute to an offender resuming their pattern so quickly after incarceration? In Groves' situation, the lack of intensive therapeutic intervention during his imprisonment could have allowed the entrenched behaviors to persist, highlighting how untreated personality traits can lead to recidivism. Upon release, Groves wasted little time resuming his activities. In April 1987, Rhonda, a 30-year-old woman, was found naked and strangled along a rural road in Douglas County, about 7 miles outside Castle Rock. Her case remained unsolved for 38 years until the 2025 DNA match confirmed Groves' involvement. This connection not only closes a chapter for her family, but also underscores the deceptive normalcy Groves had maintained in his daily life. Rhonda's murder occurred just months after his parole, suggesting rapid return to old habits driven by impulse control issues. From a mental health lens, this quick relapse might indicate antisocial personality features, where empathy deficits allow for repeated harm without remorse. Later that year, in 1988, Groves killed Diane and another woman in Adams County, both strangled and discarded in isolated spots. These acts followed a similar pattern, targeting women he encountered to his involvement in sex work and drugs. Why do some individuals fixate on vulnerable populations? Psychologically, this could relate to opportunistic predation, where the perpetrator perceives less of a risk detection, combined with the thrill of deprived from exploiting power differentials. An eyewitness account played a key role in Groves' capture. In August 1988, a resident in Denver Parks Hill neighborhood observed Groves dumping the body of a 17-year-old Tammy in an alley behind his home. The witness noted Groves' blue car and physical description, leading to his arrest on September 1, 1988. This incident reveals a moment of carelessness that contrasts with his early evasions, perhaps indicating overconfidence as a psychological red flag. How does escalating boldness signal a breakdown in self-preservation instincts? In serial offenders, this can stem from a growing sense of invincibility, often tied to narcissistic tendencies that override rational caution. Following his arrest, investigators linked Groves to multiple unsolved cases through physical evidence and witness statements. In 1989, a jury convicted him of first-degree murder in the death of Juanita Becky Williams, sentencing him to life imprisonment. He later pleaded guilty in 1990 to the murder of Pamela K. Montgomery, receiving an additional 20-year term. These convictions covered only a fraction of his suspected crimes, but they provided a window into his mindset during interrogations. Groves often minimized his actions or shifted blame, behaviors indicative of defensive mechanism common with those with cluster B personality disorders. What role does denial play in sustaining a double life? Mentally, it serves as a shield against guilt, allowing the individual to compartmentalize their violent side from their everyday persona. As investigations continued, DNA technology advanced the case further. In March 2012, the Denver District Attorney's Office announced the closure of 4 additional unsolved homicides from the 1980s, linking them all to Groves through genetic evidence. These included the deaths of Natalie, Gloria, Mary, and Rita. Each victim was strangled, reinforcing the pattern of control-oriented violence. The psychological draw to repetition in this method might point to obsessive-compulsive elements, where the act becomes maladaptive coping strategy for internal stress. Groves died in prison on October 31, 1996, while serving his life sentence, preventing further trials but not stopping the pursuit of justice for his victims. His death at the age of 42 left many questions unanswered, yet it also ended the immediate threat. In reflecting on his life of harm, One considers the impact of the survivors and families. How does prolonged uncertainty affect the mental health of those left behind? For victims' relatives, the lack of closure can lead to chronic anxiety and grief, compounded by the recent revelations that bring both relief and renewed pain. The 2025 announcement regarding Rhonda Fisher exemplifies this, as her family now has confirmation but must process the details decades later. From a counseling perspective, this underscores the need for trauma-informed support, where acknowledging the psychological toll is key. Groves' involvement in sex trafficking adds another layer to his profile. He exploited women through drugs and coercion, behaviors that suggest a deep-seated need for manipulation. Psychologically, this could stem from early experiences of feeling powerless, even in a stable home, perhaps amplified by societal pressures as a minority in his community. What happens when charisma turns toxic? In Groves' high school success, we see potential for positive leadership, yet it twisted into predatory control, illustrating how untreated issues can corrupt strengths. Authorities believe Groves may have been responsible for up to 20 murders, based on similarities in victim profiles and crime scenes, like the 1981 disappearance of Amber Ann Mason, and others remain under review, with some community members speculating on the connections. This uncertainty fuels ongoing investigation, but it highlights the perpetrator's ability to blend in. Why are some able to maintain a horrible, despicable life and a facade of normalcy for years? Mental health indicators here include high-functioning deception, often linked to psychopathic traits, while emotional detachment enables sustained harm. In analyzing Groves' motives, the why centers on power and opportunity. His crimes targeted women in precarious situations, reducing the likelihood of immediate reports. The strategic selection points to calculated risk assessment, a cognitive process that promotes emotional voids. From my experience as a counselor, such patterns often trace back to unrepressed resentment or quests for dominance absent in other life areas. Groves' post-parole crimes show a lack of deterrence, suggesting a prison time alone didn't address the root causes. What psychological interventions might have altered this trajectory? Speculatively, early therapy for drug issues could have interrupted a cycle, emphasizing the importance of holistic mental health approaches in criminal justice. The eyewitnesses who spotted him in 1988 provided a turning point, but one wonders about earlier missed signals. Neighbors describe Groves as unassuming, a common theme in these cases where charm disguises danger. This duality raises a question: how does societal blindness and subtle red flags enable escalation? Psychologically, it ties to the confirmation bias, where we overlook inconsistencies in familiar people. As we piece together the clues, from his high school accolades to his drug-fueled descent and eventual capture, the aha moment comes from recognizing the unchecked progression. The 2025 DNA link to Fisher closes one loop, yet it opens others about how many more connections await discovery. This realization brings the story full circle, showing that time and technology can reveal what psychology alone cannot always predict. Groves' case serves as a study in a contrast, a promising youth derailed by choices that spiraled into devastation. Focusing on the victims and their stories remind us that the human cost and the mental health ripple effects on communities. The psychological threads weaves a tapestry of control, deception, and unresolved inner conflicts. This story is pretty typical. If you've seen any of my other videos, here we have a young man that grew up in a family that seemed pretty stable. Both his parents were still married. They both had good jobs. They lived in a nice community. He had a good upbringing, good high school, and then it went downhill. And then the dark side came out, and we see the tragedies that happened in his life. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.